There I was, sitting in the cold marble lobby of a grand hotel in Charleston, South Carolina, at 4 in the morning. The soft hum of the air conditioner was the only sound around me, mingling with the distant crash of ocean waves outside. I wore yesterday's dress, a midnight blue I'd chosen with care, and clutched a purse heavier than I expected. Inside it was more money than most people would ever see in a lifetime. Yet here I was, feeling as abandoned as a suitcase left behind at the airport. Before we dive into her story, drop a comment and tell us where you're watching from. Hearing from people around the world makes these stories even more powerful and reminds us how connected we all are. The concierge kept stealing glances at me, his eyes filled with that pity I've seen reserved for stray animals and forgotten elders. But what he didn't know, what no one knew, was that I was no victim. Not anymore. That night, in that cold, lonely lobby, something inside me shifted. I wasn't just going to survive this moment. I was going to become the architect of the most expensive lesson my family would ever learn. My name is Evelyn Parker. If you passed me on the street, you'd probably see what everyone else saw, a well-dressed older woman with silver hair neatly pulled back, sensible shoes that cost more than most rent payments, and a quiet grace that spoke of years well lived. What you wouldn't see was the girl from a small Tennessee town, the one who married young, worked double shifts at a diner while her husband built his construction company from the ground up and invested every spare penny to build an empire. 45 years ago, when my beloved Robert died suddenly from a heart attack, I was left with 3 young children and a business I barely understood. Everyone expected me to sell everything, take whatever I could get, and fade quietly into widowhood. But I had other plans. I rolled up my sleeves, learned everything about commercial real estate, and transformed what Robert started into Butler Holdings, one of the most successful property management companies in the Southeast. Michael, Sarah, and Brian were just 8, 10, and 12 when their father passed. I worked 18-hour days, sacrificing vacations and social time so they would never want for anything. Private schools, summer camps, college tuition, all paid in full. I told myself I was building a legacy for them, something to secure their futures long after I was gone. But somewhere along the way, my love became their expectation. My sacrifices became their entitlement. My children grew into strangers who called me Mom, but treated me like a walking trust fund. It had been 5 years since we had all been in one place together, 5 years of missed birthdays, canceled holidays, and conversations that lasted just long enough for them to ask how I was feeling, mention a financial problem, and hang up with a promise to call again soon. So when I planned this family reunion at a seaside resort in Hilton Head, I spared no expense. Oceanfront suites for everyone, a presidential villa just for me, deep-sea fishing for the men, spa days for the women, golf lessons for the grandchildren. I paid for flights, meals, even spending money, because what was money compared to buying time with the people I loved most? The resort was everything the brochures promised: pristine white beaches stretching endlessly, palm trees swaying in the ocean breeze, and a villa so grand it took my breath away. I imagined mornings spent drinking coffee on the deck, sharing stories with my children, making new memories to last a lifetime. James was the first to arrive with his wife Linda and their twin boys. He inherited his father's steady hands and strong shoulders, but also the permanent crease of worry between his brows. His thriving business was constantly under pressure from rising costs and labor shortages. Over dinner, he complained quietly, "Margins are shrinking every year, Mom. Sometimes I wonder if it's even worth it anymore." Sarah came next, accompanied by her husband David and their teenage daughter Olivia. Sarah, my artistic dreamer, had always talked about opening an art gallery. She lit up as she shared plans for a space in downtown Charleston's vibrant arts district, a place to showcase emerging talents. David, ever the pragmatist, worked in finance and spoke in numbers and acronyms that left me nodding politely while my mind wandered. Olivia was mostly absorbed in her phone, snapping selfies and scrolling through social media, her teenage world separate from ours. Brian, the youngest, flew in last with his wife Rachel and her son from a previous marriage. His receding hairline and the weight of financial responsibilities made him look older than his years. He managed portfolios for wealthy clients, but seemed distant, wrapped up in his own affairs. The first few days passed with a mix of polite conversations and underlying tension. The grandchildren enjoyed the beach and resort activities but remained glued to their screens. The adults tried to connect, but every discussion veered back to money, the cost of healthcare, saving for retirement, college expenses, investments. I found myself wondering when family gatherings became business meetings, when Mom was shorthand for, "Are you going to help us with this crisis?" On the fourth day, I suggested we take a family photo at sunset. We posed on the beach, 3 generations linked by blood, history, and unspoken distance. The smiles were genuine only when the grandchildren were in the frame. In the adult shots, smiles were polite, practiced. Hands rested lightly on shoulders without warmth. Arms wrapped around waists for appearances. I told myself I was reading too much into body language, but deep down I knew the truth. The turning point came on our 5th night, during a private dinner overlooking the ocean. Candles flickered on the table. White roses, my favorite, decorated the room. I wore the midnight blue dress Robert always said, brought out my eyes. I wanted this to be a celebration of family, a moment to remind us all what truly mattered. I spoke from the heart, thanking them for being there, expressing how proud Robert would have been. For a moment, phones were put aside, and eyes focused on me. I suggested making this an annual tradition, a time to reconnect beyond business and money. But then the familiar pattern resumed. Discussions turned to investments, expansions, college funds, financial pitches disguised as family conversations. When the dinner ended, half the table was empty. Those who stayed seemed eager to leave. The next morning, I awoke to an empty restaurant and a note from my children. They'd left early to catch flights, thanked me briefly, and gone without saying goodbye. That was the moment everything changed. I sat alone, surrounded by echoes of laughter and memories, realizing I had spent decades giving not just love, but money, and in return, I had been taken for granted. But that morning in that hotel lobby was not the end of my story. It was the beginning of a new chapter, one where I would learn the difference between being loved and being used, where I would reclaim my dignity and demand the respect I deserved. If you're still watching, comment 1 so I know you're still with me. The morning after the dinner that was meant to bring us closer together, I woke up with a quiet dread settling in my chest. The sun was already high above the ocean, casting bright light through the curtains of my villa, but the warmth of the day felt like a distant memory against the chill that had taken hold inside me. I had expected to find my family at the breakfast table, laughing, sharing stories, maybe even apologizing for the awkwardness of the night before. Instead, the room was empty. The plates were cleared away, napkins crumpled and scattered, and a faint smell of coffee still lingered in the air, as if the ghosts of a family gathering lingered in the silence. A note lay on the table, its neat handwriting unmistakably my daughter Emily's. I unfolded it with trembling hands. The message was brief and cold. "Mom, we waited as long as we could. Flights to catch. Work tomorrow. Thank you for everything. Love you." 2 simple words. Love you. That felt so hollow and distant in this moment. I sat back, the note trembling in my grasp, and felt the walls around me close in. They had left without a goodbye, without a word of comfort or concern. It was as if I had been a guest in my own home, a paid service rather than a mother or grandmother. The realization hit me with a force that took my breath away. This was not neglect born of accident or misunderstanding, it was deliberate. I remember pacing the length of the villa, trying to shake off the numbness that threatened to root me to the spot. My phone remained silent. No calls, no texts, no apologies. The emptiness stretched wider with every passing minute. Hours later, I received a message from James, the oldest, the one I had hoped would lead the family with strength and compassion. "Thanks for an amazing week, Mom. The boys had a great time. Safe travels home." A heart emoji followed, generic and impersonal, a corporate holiday card in digital form. Emily sent a similar note, filled with words about perfect weather and wonderful memories, but no mention of missing breakfast or the abrupt departure. David's text was no different, polite, grateful for the generosity, but lacking the warmth of genuine connection. I stared at those messages, searching for something real beneath the carefully crafted words. What I found was a reflection of everything I had come to suspect. Love had been replaced by obligation. Affection traded for expectations. Family had become a ledger of debts and credits. That night, alone on the deck overlooking the vast Atlantic, I allowed myself to mourn. Not just for the family I thought I had, but for the woman I had become, the matriarch who gave endlessly, yet was starved for companionship and respect. The week had been a performance, a well-rehearsed play where everyone played their part perfectly except for one: me. In the quiet hours, I traced back the years, the missed phone calls, the canceled visits, the conversations that turned to money, the holidays spent feeling invisible despite the gifts and the effort, the sacrifices I had made, the love I had poured out, all reduced to numbers on a balance sheet in their minds. But that night also brought clarity. The clarity of a woman who had been blind to her own worth for too long. I realized that no amount of money could buy the love I deserved. And if my generosity had created dependence rather than connection, then perhaps it was time to change the rules of the game. The days that followed were filled with hard conversations, mostly with myself. I knew that confronting my children with these truths would be painful. Some of them might never understand, or worse, might resent me for setting boundaries. But if I continued as I had, I would remain trapped in a cycle of giving without receiving, of being seen only for what I could provide. I began drafting letters to each of them, James, Emily, and Brian, explaining my decision to change the nature of our relationship. I wanted them to know that my love was still there, but that my support would no longer come without expectations of respect and genuine connection. It was not a decision made lightly. The thought of severing financial ties after decades of support was daunting, but it was necessary. For me, for them, for the family I hoped we could one day become. In the meantime, I sought solace in small moments, the laughter of my grandchildren playing in the sand, the quiet companionship of Grace, my devoted housekeeper who reminded me that kindness still existed in the world. I found comfort in the rhythm of my garden, tending plants Robert and I had chosen years ago, watching life grow and bloom despite the hardships. And then there was Olivia, Emily's daughter, my granddaughter, a bright light in the shadow of fractured ties. Her unexpected visit would mark the beginning of a new chapter, one filled with hope and the promise of real connection. But that, as they say, is a story for another day. The decision to write those letters was one of the hardest I have ever made. For decades, I had been the one who fixed problems, who quietly solved crises with a check or a reassuring word. I was the safety net under every stumble, the foundation beneath every dream. But now, the foundation was cracking, and it was time to rebuild, this time on my terms. I sat at my mahogany desk, the same desk where Robert and I had planned our future so many years ago, and carefully chose my words. Each letter was addressed personally to James, Emily, and Brian. I wanted them to understand how much I loved them, but also why I could no longer continue the pattern that was slowly eroding our relationships. To James, I wrote about the burden of expectation he carried and my hope that we could reconnect beyond business ventures and financial dealings. I reminded him of the little boy who once followed me around construction sites, who had a laugh that lit up the room, and that I wanted to know the man behind the hard work and stress. To Emily, I spoke of her creativity and spirit, of the beauty she brought to the world through art, but also of the hurt I felt when our conversations revolved only around money and projects. I asked her to share her world with me, not just her gallery plans, but her hopes, fears, and dreams. To Brian, I shared the sadness I carried over the emotional distance between us, despite the countless hours spent managing investments and portfolios. I challenged him to see me, not as a financial advisor, but as a mother longing for connection. After days of agonizing over every sentence, I sealed the envelopes and sent them. That night, a sense of relief mingled with fear washed over me. I had broken the silence, but at what cost? The next morning brought the first call, James. His voice trembled with a mixture of confusion, hurt, and something new: openness. "Mom, I don't understand. Why now? Why all this?" he asked. I told him the truth, that I loved him deeply but felt invisible, that our relationship had become transactional and that I wanted more than just to be the bank account. There was a long pause. Then, "I didn't realize. I'm sorry, Mom. I want to fix this. Teach me how. It was the first time in years I heard vulnerability from him, and I held on to that hope tightly. Emily's call came next, tearful and intense. She accused me of abandoning her dreams, but as I explained my feelings, her anger softened. We talked late into the night, not about money, but about art, about her childhood, about the woman I was beneath the surface. Ryan's response was different, cautious, analytical. He spoke in terms of risk and consequence, but I pressed him gently, asking about his life beyond numbers. Slowly, he began to open up, admitting that he too had lost sight of who I was. Days turned into weeks. The calls and messages multiplied, some angry, some apologetic, some hopeful. The road ahead would be long and uncertain, but for the first time, I sensed a genuine desire to rebuild. Amidst this tumult, Olivia arrived quietly one afternoon, her suitcase in hand, eyes wide but determined. She was a breath of fresh air, curious, thoughtful, and unafraid to ask questions. Over tea on the porch, she shared stories of her life, her fears about college, the pressures from her parents, her longing for a connection with me beyond the vacations and gifts. "I want to know you, Grandma," she said simply. "Not just as the person who pays for things, but as you." Her words filled a space I hadn't realized was so empty. In her, I saw the possibility of healing, of love untainted by expectations or debts. As the days passed, Olivia and I formed a bond unlike any I had with my own children in recent years. We cooked together, tended the garden, and shared stories late into the night. Her presence brought warmth and light to the villa that had felt so cold just weeks before. Meanwhile, I began laying the groundwork for a foundation, a place to support elderly people like myself who had been abandoned or neglected by those they loved. The irony was not lost on me, but neither was the hope that from pain could come purpose. This was no longer just about my family or me. It was about changing a narrative that had been written for too long, one where love was conditional and worth was measured by bank balances. I was learning, slowly but surely, that true wealth lay not in dollars, but in relationships built on respect, authenticity, and affection. The journey was just beginning, but for the first time in many years, I was ready to walk it, not alone, but with those willing to join me. The days after sending those letters were heavy with silence, a silence I had long feared but knew was necessary. My phone remained quiet for what felt like an eternity, as if my children were struggling to come to terms with a truth they had long avoided. I found myself walking through the rooms of my grand home, a place that once echoed with laughter and lively conversations, now feeling eerily empty. The walls seemed to whisper reminders of family dinners turned into business meetings, of holidays where financial talks replaced heartfelt toasts. Yet, amidst the quiet, a strange peace settled over me. For the first time in decades, I was no longer carrying the weight of others' expectations. I was learning to put myself first, a lesson that felt both foreign and liberating. It was during one of these reflective walks that Olivia found me in the garden. Her presence was a balm to my weary soul. "Grandma," she said softly, "I'm glad you're here. Not just in this house, but here with me." Her words touched something deep inside. It struck me that while my children had retreated behind walls built of obligations and debts, Olivia was reaching out with a handful of genuine affection. Together, we planted bulbs and nurtured seedlings, the rhythm of tending to life grounding me in a way I hadn't expected. She asked about my childhood, my marriage to Robert, the early days when everything felt uncertain but hopeful. I told her about the sacrifices, the dreams, and the heartbreaks. She listened without judgment, her eyes reflecting a maturity beyond her years. Our conversations often drifted to the future, her ambitions, my hopes for the foundation I was building. She shared her fears about following in her mother's footsteps, unsure whether to pursue her own path or live in the shadow of family expectations. "I don't want to be trapped by money or obligations," she confessed. "I want to build something real, something I can be proud of." Oh, her honesty reminded me of my younger self, hungry for independence and meaning beyond material success. Meanwhile, back in the business world, I worked closely with my lawyer and financial advisor to reshape my estate plans. The process was complex and sometimes overwhelming, but it felt right, a tangible step toward reclaiming control. I redirected substantial portions of my wealth to charitable causes, specifically to support elderly individuals facing neglect or abandonment. This foundation was my way of turning personal pain into purpose, offering hope to those who, like me, had felt invisible in their later years. Not everyone understood or supported these changes. Calls from my children ranged from accusatory to pleading. James struggled the most, his voice often tinged with frustration and confusion. "Mom, you're throwing away everything we built," he'd say. "We're family, can't we talk about this?" But talk alone couldn't undo years of unmet needs and misplaced priorities. I knew that true healing required more than words, it required action, boundaries, and sometimes difficult choices. Sarah's messages were more emotional, laced with guilt and regret, while Brian's were pragmatic, focusing on financial implications and strategies. None addressed the heart of the matter, the loss of genuine connection. Through it all, Olivia remained my anchor. She encouraged me to embrace this new chapter, reminding me that I deserved love that wasn't conditional on a bank balance. One evening, as we watched the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold, I felt a profound sense of gratitude. Despite the fractures and disappointments, there was hope. Hope for rebuilding, for rediscovery, and for a future defined not by transactions, but by trust and tenderness. The weeks that followed my decision to draw boundaries were some of the most emotionally turbulent I have ever experienced. Each call from my children felt like a test, a fragile thread stretched taut between past expectations and uncertain futures. James was the first to visit. When he arrived at the estate, his confident exterior was replaced by something I hadn't seen in years: vulnerability. We sat together in the sunroom, surrounded by the familiar warmth of the garden just beyond the glass, and I listened as he admitted how lost he felt without the financial cushion I had always provided. "I didn't realize how much I depended on you," he said quietly. "Not just for money, but for everything." His words stirred something inside me, a mix of sorrow and cautious hope. It was the first honest conversation we'd had in a long time, and it opened the door to rebuilding a relationship that was no longer transactional. Emily's arrival was different. She came with a storm of emotion, her creative fire mingled with frustration and pain. She poured out her fears about losing her dream gallery, her anxieties about what the future held without my financial backing. "I've been so scared, Mom," she confessed, "but I'm starting to understand what you've been trying to tell us all along." Together, we began to explore new possibilities, alternative funding, partnerships, and a renewed commitment to her vision that was independent and self-driven. Brian's visit came later, marked by his quiet determination to understand. As we walked through the library, surrounded by books that chronicled decades of family history and hard-earned business success, he confessed how he had always seen me as the problem solver, the woman with the answers. "But I never really saw you," he admitted, "not as the person behind the success." Our talks were slow but meaningful, unraveling years of unspoken expectations and misunderstandings. In the midst of these personal reconciliations, Olivia continued to be a constant presence, a bridge between the past and the future. Her youthful optimism and sincerity reminded me that love could still be simple and true. She encouraged me to focus on the foundation, to channel my energy into creating a legacy that transcended family struggles. The foundation grew steadily, providing resources and companionship to elderly individuals who, like me, had felt sidelined by their own families. One afternoon, as Olivia and I prepared meals for a community event hosted by the foundation, I reflected on how far I had come. From the lonely hotel lobby to this moment of purpose and connection, my journey had been painful but transformative. The hardest lesson I learned was understanding that generosity without boundaries can become a cage. True love requires respect, reciprocity, and honesty, even when those truths are difficult to face. The rebuilding of relationships with my children would not be quick or easy. There were wounds to heal and patterns to break. But with patience and courage, I believed we could find a new way forward, one rooted in authentic connection rather than financial dependence. That night, As I sat on the porch watching stars twinkle over the quiet landscape, I felt a peace I hadn't known in years. It was not the peace of perfection, but the peace of possibility. For the first time in a long time, I was living for myself, not just for others. Spring arrived slowly in Charleston, bringing with it the promise of renewal and growth. The garden that Robert and I had tended together for years began to burst into life, vibrant blossoms pushing through the earth, much like the changes unfolding in my own life. Each day felt like a step toward healing, tentative but filled with hope. Olivia had settled comfortably into the routine of our home. She was no longer just a visitor. She was family in the truest sense. We spent mornings in the kitchen baking bread and sharing stories, afternoons planting new flowers and weeding the beds, and evenings curled up with books or chatting by the fire. Her presence reminded me of the warmth I had longed for, not bought with money but earned through time and shared moments. My relationship with my children, though still fragile, began to shift in subtle ways. James called more often, not just with business updates or requests, but to talk about his own life, his struggles and hopes. He invited me to dinners that were less about business and more about simply being together. Emily, too, found a new confidence. She started hosting small art shows with local artists, inviting me to help in ways that didn't involve money, arranging the space, greeting guests, sharing her passion. The gallery project was reborn, fueled not by financial dependence but by her own determination and creativity. Brian surprised me most. He began to visit on weekends, often bringing his stepson along. Slowly, he shared parts of his life I'd never known: his fears, his dreams beyond the spreadsheets and portfolios. Through these evolving connections, I learned to appreciate the complexities of love and family. The bonds that had been strained by years of expectation and disappointment were now being rewoven with threads of honesty and vulnerability. Meanwhile, the foundation I had started was growing in scope and impact. Each day, I heard stories from the people it touched: elderly men and women who had been forgotten, who found community and dignity through the programs we offered. Their gratitude was profound, reminding me that even in the face of personal pain, I could make a difference. One afternoon, while preparing for a fundraising event, I found myself reflecting on the journey that had brought me here. From the lonely hotel lobby where I first awoke to the reality of my family's distance, to this vibrant, hopeful place, I had learned lessons about strength, boundaries, and the true meaning of generosity. No longer was I defined solely by my role as provider. I was a woman with her own dreams, her own needs, deserving of respect and love for who I was. That night, as Olivia and I walked through the garden under a sky full of stars, she turned to me with a smile. "Grandma, this feels like the beginning of something wonderful." And in that moment, I believed her. If you're still watching, comment once so I know you're still with me. The weeks turned into months, and with each passing day, I found myself more at peace. The tensions that had once defined my family were beginning to ease, replaced by tentative steps toward understanding and forgiveness. It wasn't easy; the scars of years couldn't be erased overnight, but the willingness to try was there, and that was enough to kindle hope. James surprised me one afternoon with a small gift, a framed photo of a moment from our childhood, a reminder of simpler times. He confessed that he had been so focused on his career and providing for his family that he had forgotten to nurture the relationships that truly mattered. "I want to do better, Mom," he said, his eyes honest. "For you. For us." Emily invited me to the reopening of her gallery, a modest but vibrant space filled with the works of local artists. Standing beside her, I saw not just the woman she had become, but the promise of a future she was building on her own terms. There were no strings attached, no expectations of my financial support, just pride and joy in what she had achieved. Brian continued to show up, slowly bridging the gap between business and family. He shared stories about his stepson's school projects and asked about my garden, showing a side of himself that I hadn't seen before. Our conversations were still cautious, but growing richer with each visit. Olivia remained my steadfast companion, her youthful spirit a balm to the wounds that time hadn't yet healed. Together, we celebrated small victories, a successful fundraiser, a new friendship, a quiet afternoon spent watching the ocean waves. But the journey toward healing also meant confronting painful truths. During a family dinner one evening, the conversation turned to the past, to the misunderstandings and disappointments that had driven a wedge between us. "I wish we had seen things differently sooner," Emily said softly. "I didn't realize how much you needed us beyond the support we expected." James nodded, adding, "I was blind to how my actions affected you. I'm sorry." I listened, tears brimming, grateful for their honesty. It was a moment of vulnerability that spoke louder than years of silence. Yet, forgiveness wasn't just theirs to offer. I too had to release resentment and expectations that had weighed heavily on my heart. I spoke openly about my pain, my hopes, and my desire for a family connected not by money, but by love. The evening ended with a toast to new beginnings, to healing, and to the future we would build together. Outside, the night sky was clear, stars shining like beacons of possibility. In that moment, I felt a profound sense of gratitude. Life had given me a second chance not just to redefine my relationships, but to rediscover myself. As summer settled into Charleston, the warmth of the season seemed to mirror the gradual thawing of long-held tensions within our family. What had once been guarded interactions became open conversations. Walls built from years of misunderstanding were slowly coming down, brick by brick. Olivia flourished in this new environment. Her laughter filled the house, and her eagerness to learn about our family history brought a renewed sense of connection among us. She asked questions I hadn't heard in years about Robert's childhood, about the challenges I faced as a young widow, about traditions I'd once dreamed of passing down. One afternoon, Emily invited me to a small gathering at the gallery. It was a modest crowd, friends and neighbors who had come to celebrate the opening of a new exhibit. Watching her speak passionately about the artists and their work, I felt a surge of pride. This was her world, vibrant, creative, and hers alone. Later that evening, as we walked home together, she confided in me. "I'm learning to stand on my own, Grandma. It's scary, but also freeing." James and Brian were making their own strides. James had enrolled in a weekend course on emotional intelligence, determined to better understand the feelings he'd long ignored. Brian, inspired by Olivia's enthusiasm, had taken up gardening with me, a shared hobby that gave us quiet moments to connect without words. Our dinners became opportunities for genuine exchange. We shared stories of triumphs and failures, hopes and fears. The laughter was softer, the silences comfortable rather than strained. Yet, the journey wasn't without setbacks. Old habits resurfaced in moments of stress. Financial worries crept back into conversations, threatening to unravel the progress we'd made. But this time, we faced them with honesty and patience. During one such evening, James admitted, "I sometimes fall back into old patterns, thinking money will fix things. I'm learning it can't." I smiled gently. "It never did, James. Love and respect are the foundations we need." The foundation I had started continued to grow, becoming a beacon for others facing isolation and neglect. Each success story was a reminder that even in brokenness, healing was possible. One day, while reviewing letters of gratitude from those we had helped, I realized how much this work had become my true legacy, a testament not to wealth, but to resilience and compassion. As the sun set over the harbor, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, I stood on my porch with Olivia by my side. She slipped her hand into mine and said, "Thank you for showing me what family really means." In that moment, I knew the hardest chapter of my life was behind me. Ahead lay the promise of love rebuilt, of bridges mended, and of a future shaped by choice, not obligation. The arrival of autumn brought a crispness to the air and a renewed sense of clarity to my heart. As the leaves turned vibrant shades of amber and gold, so too did the relationships within our family begin to change, no longer defined by past grievances, but by a shared commitment to grow and heal. One afternoon, Olivia and I hosted a small gathering at the estate, inviting neighbors, friends from the foundation, and a few family members. The house buzzed with warmth and laughter, a sharp contrast to the silence that had once enveloped these walls. James arrived with a homemade pie, a simple gesture that spoke volumes about his desire to contribute beyond financial means. Emily brought a selection of paintings to display, turning the living room into a temporary gallery filled with color and life. Brian helped set the tables, his quiet efficiency a welcome presence. As I watched them interact, I felt a profound sense of gratitude. The fractures of the past were still visible, but they no longer defined us. Instead, they served as reminders of the lessons we'd learned about boundaries, respect, and the true meaning of family. During the evening, I found a moment to speak privately with each of my children. With James, I acknowledged the efforts he was making to rebuild trust and encouraged him to continue exploring his emotions with openness. With Emily, I expressed pride in her artistic resilience and reassured her that success wasn't measured by money alone but by passion and perseverance. With Brian, I shared my hope that he would continue to find balance between professional achievement and personal connection. Later, as Olivia and I cleared the dishes, she asked softly, "Grandma, do you think things will ever be the same as before?" I smiled thoughtfully. "Maybe not the same, but better because they will be real." End of tree. Our conversations deepened, exploring what it meant to love authentically and to forgive generously. I realized that healing was not a destination but a continuous journey, one that required patience, humility, and courage. The foundation continued to thrive, expanding its reach and impact. Stories from those we helped inspired me daily reminders that even when life feels broken, hope can take root and blossom. One evening, sitting by the fire with Olivia, I shared a story from my youth about my mother, her strength, and the sacrifices she made. It was the first time in a long while that I spoke openly about family history, and Olivia listened with rapt attention. Through her, I saw the possibility of legacy, not just of wealth, but of wisdom and love passed down through generations. As the night deepened, I felt a quiet peace settle over me. The woman who had once felt abandoned and invisible was now surrounded by a family striving to see and cherish her fully. And that, more than anything, was worth everything. Winter approached with its quiet grace, blanketing Charleston in a soft hush. Inside my home, the warmth of rekindled relationships kept the cold at bay. The laughter and chatter that once seemed distant now filled the rooms with life and hope. My children had come a long way since those difficult months of confrontation and reflection. While the shadows of the past lingered, they no longer dictated our interactions. Instead, we found new rhythms, moments of genuine connection, shared memories, and mutual respect. James had begun inviting me to weekend brunches, not out of obligation, but because he genuinely wanted my company. We talked about his business, yes, but also about books he was reading and places he wished to visit. I was no longer just the matriarch with a checkbook. I was a person with thoughts, feelings, and dreams. Emily's gallery blossomed into a cherished community space. I attended openings, watched her mentor young artists, and saw the pride in her eyes as she spoke of her accomplishments. She confided in me her fears and hopes, and I offered encouragement rooted in love, not finances. Brian had started attending family therapy sessions, a step that surprised me but also gave me hope. He was learning to navigate emotions he had long suppressed and to express affection without the shield of professionalism. Olivia was thriving at university, balancing her studies with her role as both student and granddaughter. Our bond grew stronger with each passing day, a testament to the power of authentic relationships. Together, we celebrated holidays with joy and laughter, no longer shadowed by unspoken tensions. We created new traditions, game nights, shared meals, storytelling evenings, moments that nourished our souls. Through it all, the foundation remained my passion and purpose. Seeing the impact of our work on so many lives gave me strength and fulfillment. It reminded me that even amidst personal trials, we can build legacies of compassion and hope. One quiet evening, as I sat by the fire with Olivia, I reflected on the journey. The path had been winding and fraught with pain, but it had led me to a place of peace. I had learned that true generosity requires boundaries, that love must be earned and given freely, not bought or demanded. I had discovered the courage to ask for respect and the grace to forgive. Looking ahead, I embraced the future with open arms, ready to live fully, love deeply, and cherish every moment with those who truly mattered. The chill of early winter had settled softly over Charleston, But inside the walls of my home, a warmth blossomed that no season could diminish. The fireplace crackled gently, casting a golden glow over the faces gathered around the dining table, my children, Olivia, and me. It was a scene I had once feared might never exist, a moment born of healing, patience, and an honesty long overdue. Looking around, I saw the subtle changes, the softening of eyes, the ease of laughter, the tentative reaching out that had replaced guarded avoidance. It was clear we were far from perfect, yet the fragile threads we were weaving promised a tapestry richer than any money could buy. James, who had once been so focused on his work that he barely saw me beyond a call for financial advice, now paused to share stories about his latest hiking trip, his voice animated as he described the colors of the Appalachian fall. He asked about my favorite books, about the paintings Olivia and I had recently hung in the hallway, about the recipes I still loved to cook. His transformation was not sudden, but gradual, a testament to the power of genuine connection over years of distance. Each step he took toward me felt like reclaiming a piece of the mother-son bond we had nearly lost. Emily, ever the dreamer, had grown into a woman who balanced passion with pragmatism. Her gallery was flourishing, a beacon for artists in the community and a hub for creativity and hope. I attended many openings, watching her beam with pride as she introduced emerging talents. We spent evenings discussing art, life, and the lessons she was learning about independence and resilience. Her laughter, once tinged with frustration and fear, now carried a lightness that lifted my spirits. I saw in her eyes the fire that had never dimmed, now fueled by the courage to build her own path. Brian's journey was perhaps the most unexpected. The quiet man who had once viewed family through a lens of financial transactions was opening his heart in ways that surprised us all. He had started attending family counseling, embracing vulnerability in small but meaningful ways. We shared moments in the garden, planting bulbs, tending roses, watching the seasons change a metaphor for the patient work of nurturing relationships. In those tranquil spaces, words were not always necessary. The presence of one another was enough. Olivia was a beacon of hope and renewal. Her enthusiasm for life and her genuine interest in knowing me beyond the roles I'd been assigned breathed new energy into our family. She asked about my mother's stories, my fears and dreams, and shared hers with a candor that both comforted and challenged me. She reminded me that love could be simple and profound, that true family was built on shared moments and mutual respect. Yet, the journey was not without its shadows. There were still days when old wounds ached, when misunderstandings flared, when the ghosts of past disappointments whispered doubts. But these moments were fewer and farther between, and we faced them together. One winter afternoon, as snow lightly dusted the garden, a rare but beautiful sight in Charleston, we gathered around the fireplace for a family meeting. It was a time to reflect, to voice hopes and fears, and to set intentions for the future. James spoke first, his voice steady and sincere. "Mom, I want you to know I'm committed to this not because of anything you give me, but because I want us to be close. I'm sorry for the years I spent focused elsewhere." Emily followed, tears glistening. "I realize now how much I relied on your generosity without really seeing you. I want to be the daughter you deserve." Brian nodded, adding quietly, "I'm learning to listen, to be present. It's hard, but I want to try." I felt tears welling in my eyes, overwhelmed by the courage it took for them to speak so honestly. I responded from my heart, acknowledging my own mistakes, my moments of stubbornness and pain. "I'm grateful for your words. I've had to learn to ask for respect and love on my terms, and I'm proud of the steps you're taking. We still have a long way to go, but together, we can create something new, something real." Olivia squeezed my hand, her eyes shining with hope. "This feels like our family's new beginning." Outside, the snow fell softly, blanketing the world in quiet beauty. Inside, we sat in a circle of light and love. A family reborn not from wealth or obligation, but from the courage to face hard truths and the grace to forgive. As the fire flickered, casting dancing shadows on the walls, I realized that these moments of connection, healing, and hope was the true legacy I had fought for. Not the properties or the money, but the bonds that sustain us when everything else fades. If you're still watching, comment one so I know you're still with me. Winter's gentle grip slowly gave way to the tentative promise of spring, a season of renewal not just for the world outside, but for the fragile connections we were nurturing within our family. Each day, as the garden stirred to life with budding flowers and new leaves, so too did our relationships awaken from years of neglect and misunderstanding. I had come to understand that the path to healing was neither linear nor swift. There were moments of light and joy interspersed with shadows of doubt and old fears. But in embracing vulnerability, we found strength a paradox that became the cornerstone of our renewed bond. Olivia blossomed in this environment of openness. She approached each day with curiosity, asking questions about the past, eager to understand the family history she had inherited but never fully known. Her presence was a balm to my soul, a living reminder that genuine connection was possible even after years of emotional distance. One afternoon, as we sat in the sunroom surrounded by the soft glow of afternoon light, Olivia asked me about my mother. "Grandma, what was she like? What did she teach you about family?" Her question opened a floodgate of memories, my mother's quiet resilience, her unwavering faith, the values she instilled in me that had carried me through hardship. I shared stories of her kindness, her sacrifices, and her unspoken strength. Olivia listened intently, absorbing the lessons woven into our family's fabric. Meanwhile, my children continued their journeys toward emotional awareness and reconciliation. James, once so absorbed in his career that he barely noticed the world beyond his office walls, had begun attending therapy sessions, exploring the feelings he had long buried beneath layers of responsibility and expectation. Emily, having weathered the collapse of her gallery venture, was finding new avenues to express her creativity and leadership. She organized community workshops and collaborated with local artists, her passion undimmed and her spirit renewed. Brian, ever the pragmatist, was slowly learning to balance his analytical mind with emotional insight. His visits became less about financial discussions and more about sharing life, his challenges, his hopes, his fears. Our family dinners, once fraught with tension and guarded words, evolved into times of genuine exchange. We laughed, debated, reminisced, and planned not just for business, but for shared experiences and memories to come. One evening, as we gathered around the table, James raised a glass in a toast. "To new beginnings," he said, his voice steady and sincere. "To the family we are becoming." His words resonated deeply. It was a commitment to growth, to forgiveness, and to embracing the imperfections that make us human. Yet, vulnerability was not without its challenges. There were days when old wounds reopened, when words were said too harshly, when the weight of past hurts threatened to overwhelm the fragile progress. But with each stumble, we chose to reach out again, to listen more deeply, to forgive more freely. The foundation I had established continued to flourish, its work a source of profound satisfaction. Hearing stories from those we had helped, elders rediscovering their worth, reconnecting with estranged families, finding joy in community reminded me that healing and hope were possible, no matter the circumstances. Through the foundation, I found purpose beyond my personal trials, a way to transform pain into compassion, loss into love. One crisp spring morning, as I walked through the garden with Olivia, we paused beneath a magnolia tree in full bloom. She turned to me, her eyes bright with conviction. "Grandma, you've taught me so much about strength and love. I want to carry that forward to build my own legacy, not just of wealth, but of kindness and courage." Her words filled me with hope. The future was uncertain, yes, but in her and in the renewed bonds of our family, I saw the promise of something enduring and beautiful. As the season unfolded, I embraced the journey ahead with a heart open to love, healing, and the quiet power of vulnerability. The slow arrival of spring brought with it an air of transformation, not just in the blooming flowers and warming days, but in the hearts of those I loved. Our family, once fractured and distant, was gradually learning the art of reconciliation not through grand gestures or financial exchanges, but through presence, understanding, and shared vulnerability. Olivia was a catalyst in many ways. Her youthful energy and openness challenged us to rethink old patterns, She had a way of asking questions that cut through the noise, gently unveiling the emotions we'd long avoided. At times, it was uncomfortable. At others, it was profoundly healing. One afternoon, as Olivia and I sat by the window overlooking the garden, she spoke quietly. "Grandma, what scares you the most about this new chapter?" Her question caught me off guard. I thought about it carefully before answering. Sometimes, it's the fear that old wounds might never fully heal, that no matter how much we try, the past still holds power over us. She reached out, taking my hand. "I think healing isn't about forgetting, but about choosing to move forward despite the past." Her insight reminded me of the wisdom that comes from youthful honesty, the clarity that life experience sometimes obscures. It was a moment of connection that deepened our bond and filled me with renewed hope. Meanwhile, my children were each navigating their own challenges and embracing this new dynamic. James, who had always been the most reserved, surprised me by organizing a weekend retreat, a chance for us to spend uninterrupted time together, away from daily distractions. The retreat was held at a quiet lakeside cabin, surrounded by towering pines and the gentle lapping of water. It was a setting that invited reflection and openness. Over the course of the weekend, we shared stories, some joyful, some painful. We listened more than we spoke, learning to hold space for each other's emotions without judgment. Emily brought along her sketchbook, capturing moments in charcoal and ink images of the lake at dawn, the flickering campfire, the faces of her family softened by the twilight. Brian took charge of preparing meals, a way of contributing beyond the business discussions that had once dominated our conversations. We laughed and cried in equal measure, breaking down the barriers that years of misunderstandings had built. In those shared moments, I saw glimpses of the family I had longed for, a family bonded not by obligation or inheritance, but by genuine love. Back home, Olivia continued to flourish in her studies and her role as a bridge between generations. She introduced me to new friends, helped organize community events for the foundation, and brought a vibrancy to my life that was both unexpected and deeply cherished. As the days lengthened and the flowers bloomed in full, I found myself reflecting on the journey that had brought me here. From the cold hotel lobby where I'd felt abandoned and invisible, to this place of warmth and connection, the transformation was profound. It had taken years to dismantle the walls of expectation and entitlement, but in doing so, we had discovered something more valuable than any inheritance, the gift of authentic relationship. The foundation's work had grown as well, touching more lives and reminding me daily of the resilience of the human spirit. Hearing from those who had found hope and dignity through our efforts was a constant source of inspiration. One evening, as I sat by the fire with Olivia, I shared stories from my youth of love and loss, of hard lessons learned and hard-won victories. She listened with rapt attention, asking thoughtful questions that showed her desire to understand not just my history, but the values I hoped to pass on. I realized then that legacy was not just about what we leave behind materially, but about the stories we tell, the lessons we impart, and the love we nurture. The journey was far from over. Challenges remained, and the past still whispered at times, but the future held a promise. I was eager to embrace a future built on respect, understanding, and a love renewed. If you're still watching, comment 1 so I know you're still with me. If you're still watching, comment 1 so I know you're still with me. Spring had fully arrived in Charleston, transforming the world outside into a vibrant mosaic of blooming flowers, singing birds, and gentle breezes carrying the scent of jasmine and magnolia. The garden that Thomas and I had once lovingly tended was now alive with color and movement, a living testament to care and renewal. Each petal, each leaf was a reminder that life moves forward, even after long winters of hardship. Inside the house, that same spirit of renewal was taking root. The heavy silence that had once blanketed the rooms was replaced by warmth, laughter, and the hum of conversation. Our family, once fractured and distant, was slowly healing, each of us learning to navigate new ways of being together. Our dinners, once rigid and filled with unspoken tensions, were becoming celebrations of presence and progress. The clinking of glasses and the exchange of stories wove a tapestry of connection that had been absent for so long. James, who had been the most reserved of my children, now eagerly invited me to join him for weekend hikes through the nearby trails. We talked about everything from the vivid colors of fall leaves to the latest novels he had read, and even plans for future travels. These simple moments filled me with joy and a sense of belonging I hadn't felt in years. Emily's art gallery had blossomed beyond my hopes. What started as a modest space to showcase emerging artists had grown into a cultural hub where community and creativity intertwined. She organized workshops, hosted exhibits, and became a mentor to many young artists navigating their own dreams. Watching her thrive reminded me of the fire she had carried since childhood, tempered now by resilience and wisdom. Brian's progress was perhaps the most profound. The man who had once shied away from emotional expression was gradually learning to embrace vulnerability. He attended counseling sessions regularly and shared his feelings more openly during our family gatherings. His slow but steady steps toward emotional honesty brought tears to my eyes, a sign of growth and healing that filled me with hope. Olivia remained the heart of our family, bridging generations with her youthful energy and empathetic spirit. She asked thoughtful questions about our family history, listened deeply to stories from my past, and shared her own dreams with a candor that inspired all of us. Her presence was a light in the sometimes dim corridors of our family life. As spring deepened, we began creating new traditions that honored our journey. We held storytelling nights where each of us shared memories, some joyful, some bittersweet, and celebrated our shared resilience. We planted a tree in the garden together, symbolizing our commitment to growth and renewal. One memorable evening, as twilight painted the sky with hues of pink and lavender, we gathered around the fireplace. James raised his glass, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "To new beginnings," he said. "To the family we are becoming." His words echoed in the quiet room, touching each heart. It was a toast not just to the present, but to the future we were building, one grounded in honesty, respect, and love. Yet, even in these moments of joy, the journey was not without its challenges. Old wounds occasionally resurfaced, and misunderstandings sparked brief fires of tension. But each time, we chose to face them together, to listen and to forgive, understanding that healing is a process, not a destination. My work with the foundation continued to bring purpose and meaning to my days. Each story of an elder rediscovering dignity, reconnecting with family, or finding community was a testament to the enduring power of compassion. The foundation had grown into more than an organization. It was a movement of hope and renewal for those too often forgotten. Through the foundation's work, I met many individuals who had faced abandonment and neglect, and their resilience inspired me daily. Their courage to rebuild their lives reinforced my belief that healing is always possible, even in the darkest moments. One afternoon, Olivia and I walked through the garden, now lush with spring blooms. She stopped beneath a towering magnolia tree, its creamy flowers glowing in the sunlight. "Grandma," she said, "you've taught me so much about strength and love. I want to carry that forward to build my own legacy, not just of wealth, but of kindness and courage." "Henri?" Her words filled me with hope and pride. I realized that the future, uncertain as it was, held promise in the next generation's hands. But beyond the personal joys, I remained mindful of the work still to be done within our family. Healing is never perfect or complete. It requires continual effort and grace. One evening, as I sat alone by the window watching the stars emerge in the velvet sky, I reflected on how far we had come. From the painful isolation of that cold hotel lobby where I'd once felt discarded, to this place of warmth and connection, the transformation was profound. I thought about the lessons I'd learned, about generosity with boundaries, about the courage to demand respect, about the grace to forgive not just others but myself. The legacy I hoped to leave was no longer defined by wealth or possessions, but by the love and authenticity we cultivated. The road ahead would have its bumps, but with open hearts and a shared commitment, I believed we could face whatever came with resilience and hope. As the night deepened, I felt a quiet peace settle within me, a peace born of acceptance and the knowledge that true family is made, not born built on trust, effort, and unconditional love. Chapter 15. The True Meaning of Family. Sitting here now, reflecting on everything that has passed, I realize how much this journey has taught me not just about my family, but about myself, about love, and about what it truly means to belong. For years, I believed that my role was simply to provide, to be the financial pillar, the fixer of problems, the steady hand holding everything together. I thought love was measured by what I gave, by the gifts, the vacations, the college tuition. But that kind of love, I've learned, can be hollow if it's one-sided. The hardest lesson of all was understanding that love cannot be bought or demanded. It has to be freely given and freely received. It thrives not in transactions but in genuine connection. I think of the countless times I sat alone in my villa, surrounded by expensive gifts and empty rooms, longing for the laughter and warmth that had once seemed so close but was slipping away. It was a painful awakening, but a necessary one. Today, surrounded by those who truly see me, my children, as they are becoming, my granddaughter who reminds me of hope, and friends who cherish me for who I am, I understand what Michael J. Fox said so simply and so powerfully. Family is not an important thing. It's everything. Family is not about perfection. It's not about endless harmony or avoiding conflict. It is about choosing to stay, to forgive, to grow together despite the challenges. It is the shared history and the shared future, the imperfect love that binds us. My hope now is to continue nurturing those bonds, to invest in relationships that honor our humanity rather than our bank accounts, to cherish the moments of joy, the times of struggle, and the quiet understanding that, in the end, we are all seeking to be loved and to love in return. If this story has touched your heart, I invite you to reflect on your own family, the connections you treasure, the wounds you carry, and the possibilities for healing. Sometimes the greatest gift we can give ourselves and others is the courage to demand respect, to set boundaries, and to open our hearts to authentic love. Thank you for listening. Please share your thoughts and stories in the comments below. Your voice matters. And if you haven't already, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more stories that celebrate resilience, hope, and the enduring power of family. Remember, family is everything.